All right, man, peace. You know, it's so crazy. Tom Brady seems to have the same type of fans as LeBron James. Those are the only two athletes that I can remember in my lifetime that even when they lose the championship, their fans still try to make a case that they should have won the MVP. I'm going to explain my definition of MVP and why it should be impossible for a player on a losing team to ever even be considered to win an MVP. But due to the fact that in history, players on losing teams have won the MVP before, that sets a bad precedent and it creates unnecessary arguments. But anyway, they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
That's why it's so accurate. Welcome back. Joined now by Fox NFL analyst Mark Schlereth, founder of the Big League, Jason McIntyre. Let's return to, of course, the Super Bowl, where Nick Foles took home the MVP after a stellar performance, 373 yards, 3 TDs, but his numbers actually look pedestrian next to Tom Brady's. Of course they did. 500 yards, 7 passes at 25 yards or more, 23 passing first downs. Good Lord. And by the way, rushed repeatedly. I know the Patriots lost, but should Brady have been the MVP?
Well, before anyone else answers, let me first say no, absolutely not. Tom Brady could not have won MVP because how could you be the most valuable player on a team that lost? You can only be the most valuable player in a winning effort. Now, what many people talk about when they say that LeBron should have won the MVP or Tom Brady should have won the MVP, they're talking about the most outstanding player in a certain game or series or what have you, not the most valuable player. You cannot be the most valuable player when your team lost because they could have lost without you. Now, if you were the reason why your team won, then of course you can be the most valuable player. You will be the most valuable player. And there can be some debate over whether or not someone on a team should have won the most valuable player over someone else. But an athlete on a losing team can only be considered for the most outstanding player in a certain matchup. And if they ever were to create an award for that, then sure. Tom Brady can get the most outstanding player. Or LeBron James can get the most outstanding player. LeBron can go and get average 30 points and 10 assists and 11 rebounds and go ahead and take home that most outstanding player award. But no, you cannot be the most valuable. The most valuable player is on a team that won.
No, and hell no.
Thank you, Whitlock.
And, one guy trailed most of the game. That's why he threw more. And one guy was facing a defense whose secondary seemed clueless and or totally afraid of getting a pass interference call, letting the referees take the game over.
Well, I believe that Nick Foles was phenomenal. His decision-making in the game was splendid. It was pristine. Whatever term you'd like to use. He executed perfectly. Like I was telling a brother, shout out to my brother Hugh, the man looked like Joe Montana. He looked just like Joe Montana. That's how Nick Foles looked. Just slicing and dicing, throwing perfect passes on tight coverage.
Nick Foles had one of the all-time great Super Bowl performances.
I agree.
Tom Brady had some nice stats. Kyra, you do know the first half actually counts in football.
All I know is blind resume. If you and I apply for a job and you don't have any friends in the company and your dad didn't work there, if we just apply for a job, blind resume, the best resume should win.
Well, Colin is very good with his analogies, but that one is a poor one. Because if you were going to use the resume analogy, then you'd be operating in a vacuum. As we all know, in sports, you're not operating in a vacuum. You're operating according to scenario-based execution. In other words, as Whitlock stated so well, someone can have greater stats predicated off of a different role in his offense on his team, a different style of offense. What is the score? What is precipitating you throwing more or running more? Those are all things that determine who is going to have more passing yards or gaudier statistics. This is what I talk about with LeBron. Every team that he's on runs the LeBron James system. So when people try to glorify LeBron by talking about his stats, he's supposed to have great stats. People like him and Russell Westbrook, they're supposed to have great stats because that's their number one focus. That's their number one goal, is to is to accumulate great stats, because that's how they define their success on the court. And if they happen to win along the way, great. But believe me, even though they put forth the energy or the image of someone who wants to win first, they want to win, but they want to be the main reason why their team wins, and they want to be able to look at their stat sheet and say, oh, wow, look at what I did. Now, Tom Brady is not necessarily like that, but you cannot evaluate who had a better game between him and Nick Foles purely based off of stats. So the blind resume analogy is not a good one.
135 yards passing, less of a running game. Having to play from behind, and Philadelphia's got a better pass rush. Tom was hurried 9 times. Foles was largely untouched. More big plays down the field. Oh, yeah, Brady lost his best receiver in the second quarter. And also, Brady had, for the first half, to keep Gronk in to chip block because they were concerned that Philadelphia's pass rush would overwhelm New England. So they kept Gronk in to chip block for an hour.
Well, you know what? You might as well have came on set with a violin, because none of that has anything to do with who played better. Now, you could say that Brady had greater circumstances to overcome, but you laud a player like a Tom Brady for overcoming greater circumstances when you win. You cannot be the most valuable player on a team that lost.
Name me the top 4 passes completed in that game. The passes that anybody will remember and talk about. They're all thrown by one guy.
The Chris Hogan touchdown.
Nobody remembers that dumb shit. The most memorable pass in the game for me is the pass to Clement, and then right after that is the pass to Alshon Jeffrey. Perfect throws and great catches.
You don't remember that one? It's perfect throw.
Hey, it's wide open like all the other.
Well, there is that one you were given that the guys touched, controversial. Chris Collinsworth said, "I give up." That's the most memorable touchdown to me.
The problem with a blind resume is, from your reference, you were blind while you were watching that game.
I agree. Thank you, sir.
You can actually, like, I look at, if you want to make an argument, you don't make it for Brady. You want to make an argument, make the argument that the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles was the MVP. You watch them pick up blitzes. You watch them dominate the line of scrimmage.
Yes, they were great, but spoken like a true offensive lineman to talk about the offensive line being the MVP. Mark Schlereth goes way back, for those of you who don't know. He was a member of the Hogs, the legendary offensive line of the Washington Redskins in the early 90s. He also was an offensive lineman on that great Denver Broncos offensive line that helped Terrell Davis get 2,000 yards in one season.
Do you know how great it is to be on offense? And you'll attest to this. When it's 2nd down and 4 every time, because you're getting 6 yards a clip when you run the ball, and you're in situations, favorable situations, 3rd down and short, where your whole playbook is open from a conversion standpoint.
Look at that throw.
Yeah, well,
I could make that.
Listen,
Come on.
Brady was phenomenal. There is no question.
Brady was good.
Five football fields.
Yeah.
Trailing most
Brady
of the
was
game.
good.
Yeah.
Hey, man, one guy converted 10 of 16 third down.
Yeah, when you don't face a pass rush.
No. That means he got in 3rd down situations 16 times. The New England's defense wasn't nearly as horrible as you think.
I agree. I think that they did as well as they could, but you have to give a lot of credit to Nick Foles. He was extremely well prepared, and he went out on the field and he executed the game plan. That makes him a great quarterback for that day. He's not necessarily a great quarterback, but he was for that day, and that's all they needed.
And again, I'm not saying they were great, but Nick Foles was phenomenal.
And the other thing is, Nick Foles threw dudes open.
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially on those fly routes. The bomb that he hit Clement with was a perfect throw. Perfect throw. As well as the one that he hit Alshon Jeffrey with. Took very little adjustment by the receivers. The adjustment by Alshon Jeffrey was a little bit more pronounced than by Clement. The ball to Clement basically just fell right into his hands.
Like, those were good throws, but they were wide open receivers. By the way, I could pick out 4 or 5 balls that Brady threw that were woefully inaccurate. Behind the receiver, could have been intercepted. I thought Nick Foles was exceptional.
Throwing into tight windows all day.
Throwing guys
the one
open,
thing
yes.
You miss on the resume. This guy just started like 2 months ago. Okay, he's been with 3 teams in like 5 years.
Yeah, but that's not a factor to me in who should have been the Super Bowl MVP. This topic is about who executed better on that day. And in order for your execution to count in an MVP conversation, it must have resulted in a victory. You can only be valuable if your performance led to a victory. Why is that? Because no matter how gaudy your stats, if you had not played, your team still would have lost. The result would not have changed. So how could you be of value if your performance did not lead to a change in result?
This is a guy who for 2 weeks we said, oh, Belichick, the greatest adjuster in NFL history. Halftime adjustments. What did he do to Matt Ryan last year? Confounded him. Falcons did nothing in the second half. So we expect all these adjustments for Foles. What did Nick Foles do in the second half? Lights out. He out-Brady's Tom Brady on the...
And yeah, speaking of that, where are all the conspiracy theorists who talk about how the league does this for New England and the league does that for New England? I'll probably be touching on this topic a little bit more pronounced in another video. If it had been New England that got some of the dicey calls that Philadelphia got, especially on the catch by Clement, the touchdown by Ertz, it would have been the fix was in. The league is working hand in hand with New England. That's why I said, look, I don't want to hear none of that dumb shit. You got a lot of people who want to sound smarter than they really are. Oh, the refs are always for New England. You know why New England tends to get the calls? Because they have a penchant for being extremely well coached. So it's far less likely for them to get called for holding or for pass interference because of the way that they're trained by Belichick. Now, Belichick had a very poor coaching performance in yesterday's game. There's no doubt about that. Why is that? Because he outsmarted himself. He outcoached himself. And that's all that happened. And you cannot afford to outcoach yourself when you're facing a team that has a pronounced advantage in roster over your own team. But it's just amazing to me how many people talk about how the fix was in here and the fix is in there and Jamachia and all these other things that people know very little about what they're speaking about. But when the result comes out in their way, how they would like it to come out, all of a sudden it was a great game. I got you.
On the final drive in the fourth quarter. 7-minute drive to win the game. Brady gets the ball back twice. What happened? Nothing. Fumble, Hail Mary, incomplete. I mean, Nick Foles by far the MVP of that.
I always think, what do you do with what you have? I think when you lose,
Right, but what do you do with what you have has nothing to do with who's going to be the MVP for a game, Colin. I know you're a Tom Brady fan and you got mesmerized by the Tom versus Time the documentary on Facebook. I get it, but you can't let that trickle over into your understanding of who was truly the MVP of that game in the Super Bowl. If anything, if you want to give Tom Brady credit for being the MVP, give him credit for stepping up in the pocket into the pass rush and making a very bad decision to try to throw the football when he should have just taken a sack on that second to last drive. Give him credit for that if you want to call him the MVP of the game, because the MVP has to do things that result in the team winning. And certainly his decision to try to throw the ball in that level of congestion led to Philadelphia winning the game.
he literally lost Gronk in the second half against Jacksonville, and he lost Brandon
Has
Cook
no
here.
impact on this game.
Well, I mean, to me, it's just like if you lose your best coworker and you still overcome it and you throw 500 yards.
You mean like Jason Peters, who's going to the Hall of Fame?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Or Darren Sproles.
Brent Sproles could be another Hall of Famer as well.
Well,
Yeah.
who had the better defense? Who had the better O-line?
Right, well, now you're arguing for roster. That still has nothing to do with who was the MVP of the game, Colin.
I'm not sure either defense has anything.
Right.
The Eagles' defense, again, Brady said they made one play. He's not.
Yes, they made one play, but Philadelphia has discernibly the better roster from top to bottom. Secondary, front four, linebackers, offensive line. Philadelphia might have the best offensive line in the NFL. They have a good wide receiver core, great quarterback play from both their starter and backup, deep running backs. They're pretty stacked, man.
They did.
Right.
The Eagles' defense was not great.
He had the ball. His first three drives, going in with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, was 3 drives, 3 touchdown drives, all I think 75 yards plus on each one of those. I will tell you this though, roster-wise, the Eagles are a better football team.
Absolutely, thank you, sir.
Roster-wise, you go man for man, there's no question. But to come in there, Nick Foles, come on. Nick Foles has been a backup. He had the one great year with Chip Kelly. He went to the Rams. He was awful.
Yeah, because of Jeff Fisher, the worst coach of quarterbacks in NFL history. You look back now and you have to think about what Vince Young could have been had he not been drafted by Jeff Fisher. I mean, Steve McNair probably should go to the Hall of Fame for achieving the amount of success that he achieved with Jeff Fisher as his coach. Just looking back in retrospect now.
Basically asked for his release, went and did a football rehab year in Kansas
Almost
City.
quit football.
Right, wanted to quit football, comes back, and then he's thrust into this, and he wasn't very good the last 2 games of the regular season. And Doug Peterson sits down, his staff goes back to that Chip Kelly time when he went 27-2, touchdowns, interceptions, really re-implemented some of that kind of RPO, collegiate style mix, kind of amalgamate that with a pro style of offense.
Absolutely. That's what you must do with your personnel. That's what great coaches do. That's how you evaluate how good your coach is. Not based off of his tendency to try to force everyone on the team to execute his game plan or execute his system. But can he meld his system to maximize what each player brings to the table? Any type of great administrator has to be malleable. In any scenario where you're interdependent on the next person. Hell, if you're in a relationship, you have to be malleable to a degree. You can't be too rigid. Like Bruce Lee used to say, the stiff tree, when it faces a strong wind, is going to break. But the bamboo or the willow is malleable, it's pliable, so it can bend with affliction and bounce back. That's how you have to be. If you're a great coach, you have to be able to adjust. And kudos to Peterson for being able to bring out the best in Nick Foles. Once again, a coach is like an educator. To educate means to bring the best out of someone.
Offense. And this kid has been phenomenal since the first quarter of that divisional playoff game. That is 11 quarters in a row where he has been lights out.
He made throws on the move. Look, the 4th down throw to Ertz won the game.
Yes, that was a great play.
What was a pick?
No, it was it was the only place where Ertz could catch the ball and get the first. It was an incredible play.
Yes, and for those of you who don't know, Colin Cowherd picked New England not just to win, but to blow Philadelphia out. So that's why he's bitter.
Nick Foles, as well-deserved an MVP as there ever has been in the Super Bowl. Coming up,
I agree. And that's pretty much it on that video. Don't get me wrong. I think that Tom Brady catches a very bad rap. He has a lot of haters, as you can expect for someone who's super successful, at least in regards to the football field. Now, certain things that he does off the football field are certainly questionable, particularly if we want to go into the or from the standpoint of his origins, etc. But in regards to how he is able to execute on the football field, you could throw him in a hat with maybe 3 or 4 other guys. He's certainly top 5, top 3 greatest quarterbacks of all time for anyone who's truly paying attention. There's no doubt about that. But Nick Foles got a much-deserved Super Bowl MVP for his performance. But anyway, peace.